Okay, guys, Draw With Me, episode 5. And we're actually going to switch it up a little bit. We're going to leave the Roman soldiers in the dust for a bit. I will return to those, still working on that composition. But, you know, as I've been sketching these soldiers, I'm realizing that I've got a lot of work to do on those hands, which is what we're going to be drawing today. I've always struggled with hands, and I think every single artist has, because, I mean, look at them. They're just so hard to draw. You know, they move in different angles. The perspective is really just, you know, the fingers bend and they twist, and yeah, they're just hard. They're just hard to do, and I want to get better at them. So this isn't so much a tutorial, because I myself am still learning. I sketched up these sketches of, you know, the bones of the hand, and I'm trying to get better at drawing the bones in different positions first, and I'm actually having a lot of fun with it, so I figured I would continue doing this for a bit, just, you know, get really good at drawing the bones before putting the muscles on. I've never really delved into hands with this much detail before. I have studied the anatomy, but every single time I studied the anatomy of hands, I always just kind of forgot. And so I'll show you how I've drawn hands up until this point. So I've got a few sketches here. I was drawing some, you know, like some face designs. I was just sketching some faces. This is for like another composition I'm working on. For a different project, and you can kind of see some of these hand sketches I've got here, and this is kind of how I drew hands up until this point. Just very basic blocky hands, very inspired by Gottfried Bames. They're very simple. You know, if you have a look at those in the corner there, I'm just trying to get it on camera, you can see just how simple those forms are. They're just rectangular, like the fingers are like rectangular prisms. And the hand is just a block. And that's basically like an indication of that muscle, of which I've already forgotten the name of. That's the thing when you study anatomy. You study it so deeply, and then you end up forgetting the names of things anyway. But, you know, as artists, it's not the names that we're worried about of each individual muscle and bone. It's really the structure. And this is how I draw heads. This is how I draw anatomy. I'm always thinking about the structure. So I'm not thinking about the detailed anatomy. You can see I got a bit of a... You can see I've been watching Proko's tutorial as well. Let me just get that in focus. You see those finger bones there? I do like Proko's channel. It's he draws very stylistically. And you know, I don't want to emulate his style too much, but I do like learning from him because he is a great source of information. You see, you got some more hands down here, and you know, I'm just using very blocky forms, and I've always gotten away with that, to tell you the truth. Like, this is the thing. When I was first studying anatomy, I would study all the bones like this, and then the muscles and the fat pads of the fingers, and, you know, all of those nitty-gritty anatomical bits and pieces. And I was still bad at drawing it. Like, I kind of started getting good with the positions of the bones and the names of things and all of that stuff, but I still couldn't draw it properly. You know, and I was like trying to draw all the veins and the tendons and everything. And it didn't make my drawing any better. And the problem, you know, the biggest mistake that I made was because I was neglecting perspective. And, you know, your drawing really depends on these blocky forms. Okay, you've actually got to get the basics right before you start adding anatomy to it. And I was doing it the other way around. I was trying to study the anatomy first, and I didn't really bother doing the basic perspective of the hand. I just wanted to dive straight into the anatomy, and that's where I went wrong. So then I started drawing these like more blocky hands, just, you know, finding ways to make them look better without, you know, distracting myself with all the anatomical detail. And despite being a lot more basic, I felt that these hands looked a lot better. They actually look more three-dimensional. And I've always gotten away with that. Like, I'll show you this character design that I did sometime last year. You know, this is like a... I know, I said we weren't going to bring the Romans into today's lesson, but here we are. So anyway, you can see the hands that I've drawn here. They're very small, you know, like, because it's a full figure drawing, basically. This was like a full character design. So I'm just going to flip him this way so he's aligned with the camera. And you can kind of see the hands that I've drawn on him, they look pretty good. I don't think they're 100% anatomically correct. You know, this guy I just kind of drew for my head, so I was kind of faking a lot of it, if that makes sense. And then maybe I would just pull out a reference here and there, but I was kind of faking a lot of it. And that kind of got me good results. So I just drew very blocky fingers, like I always did. You know, some indications of the knuckles. And then I just kind of relied on rendering it really well. And that's gotten me pretty good results up until now. So, you know, when you're drawing anatomy, you always want to focus on the structure. You want to focus on the basic structure and how to draw it in different perspectives with a little bit of careful rendering on the side. And that will get you good results. That will get you the illusion of anatomy. And that's what I did, you know. That's what I have been doing for a very long time. But in today's Draw With Me episode, I want to get good at hands now. I actually really want to try and improve them a bit. Because I don't want to be bad at them forever. So, I'm starting with the bones. And I'm actually going to choose one of these sketches. So I like this pose here. That's an interesting pose too. That's a good one. But, you know, I'm noticing, like, in these compositional sketches that I've been doing, I've actually been struggling with hands a little bit more. Like I said, I've been faking it for a while, but I'm starting to notice my weaknesses. Some of the hands are looking a bit too simplistic. I'm having trouble deciding where the shadows should go, and I'm having trouble posing them, which is why I'm going back into the anatomical studies. So, I like this pose. I think this is a very nice... I'm going to try... So basically what I'm going to do, this is the challenge today, take this blocky, this is the only reference I'm going to use. I'm going to take this blocky looking reference and I'm going to draw it like this. And this is kind of what I've been doing up until now. So this might be disastrous because, like I said, I'm still learning these hands. I think hands are a sort of subject you never stop learning. This is my first drawing of the day too, which is probably a bad idea. I should have done a bit of a warm-up sketch, but it's quite all right. So, the challenge today is to use that really blocky reference, that very simplistic diagram. I'm trying to draw the hand bones in a realistic manner. And like I said, guys, it's probably not going to turn out very good. But hopefully it will. There's only one way to find out. But yeah, I feel like I should have actually done more warm-up. Some more warm-ups. That would have been a Great idea. But I'm only drawing the hand bones today. I'm not going to confuse myself too much with the muscles. Alright. Now, the index finger is a bit more extended, which I can sort of maybe draw an angle like that. And the rest of the fingers are a little more curved. So let me just kind of mark the position of each finger here. So I'm not going to draw too fast today. Not that I ever do. I've been noticing my drawings seem to be taking me a while, but that's okay. Little finger goes there. So this is kind of how I start my drawing. I don't know if you can see that because I'm keeping my strokes very light, which is always a good idea, to keep your strokes very light on the page. So I'm keeping them very light today, and just mapping in the envelope of the forms. And that's the first knuckle, or no, that's the first knuckle. This would be like the second knuckle of the index finger. So just positioning things with straight lines, and I think it does take a little bit of practice to do this well, because the drawing starts off very abstract. It starts off very, very abstract, and you've kind of got to visualize ahead of time what's actually happening in the drawing. The fingers are sort of tapering towards the end, so they're going to get skinnier. So that's another thing I've got to worry about. But you can see what I'm doing here, just kind of sketching in that shape of the index finger there. Second knuckle of the middle finger. Ring finger, and then the pinky finger would go there. So I'm just kind of, again, I'm just using that very blocky looking reference there. I might just keep that in the corner of the video so you can see that, and you can kind of compare what I'm doing. But yeah, this isn't so much a tutorial because I'm really just trying to figure it out myself. In my character design course, I did teach my method for drawing hands in just these very blocky planes, which, again, have always yielded pretty consistent results. Like, I always believe that structure is more important than anatomy. Like, if you can just break it down into basic planes, then that's like probably 70% of the battle right there, because then you can sort of easily determine where the light source is going to go. It'll be easier to sort of sketch in those shadows, like where they're going to go. So that's why I taught, you know, anatomy in a very basic way, because that's what helped me to draw from imagination. Drawing anatomy in a very detailed kind of manner never really got me fantastic results, if I'm being honest. But because I have sort of more or less familiarized myself with the basic structure of the hand, I feel like I could probably start adding more anatomical detail, which I've always neglected up until this point. So, but it starts with the bones of the hand, and that's what I'm going to try and get good at today. And then once I'm comfortable drawing the bones, then I can move on to the muscles. So I'm really going to take my time with these studies. And I might try and just do like a hand study every day. Maybe just spend an hour each day drawing a hand, different positions. I think an hour is a good time to study. Bit of a plane change there in the center of the hand-ish. Okay. So now I'm trying to think about, well, I've got to make this look a little more 3D. So I'm actually going to draw sort of like an X-ray view of like the palm of the hand. So we're looking at the back of the hand, obviously, as you can tell in the diagram. But I'm actually going to draw, just lightly sketch in the palm side of the hand that we're seeing here. This is where the knuckles are attached to. I'm going to just sketch that in gently. And it's very loose, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect. Just going to keep that very loose. And I'm also going to sketch in the what is it called? The carpus, I think, where it's attached to the wrist here. So you can see I've just simplified that. There's a lot of bones in this form. But I've simplified it into a blocky form because, you know, if you have a look at my wrist, you can't see any of those individual bones. You can see the ulnar and the radial bone, but the carpus, which is this area, just before the thumb joint, it's not really visible. You can see the metacarpals if I flex my fingers. You can see maybe where like the tendons join and sort of go into the arm there. But those individual bones that make up the carpus, they're not really, you're not really seeing those on the surface. So that's how I draw anatomy now. Like if you can't see it on the surface, then don't draw it, okay? Just leave that for the doctor, okay? He can figure it out. I'm not a doctor, I'm an artist. And my job is to simplify anatomy in an effective way, but also in a way that's believable. And this is pretty much how I draw anatomy now. And you can see these plane changes that I'm drawing for the carpus. They're not very, I wouldn't say they are true to life. But these plane changes are like my, I guess, interpretation of that form. And so what I'm doing there, you know, because the palm sort of, there's like this sort of curved tunnel bit of the palm. Again, I did have a bit of a refresher watching that Proko video. Great video, by the way. But there's like this sort of tunnel form in the palm view, so I'm just sketching that in. I'm not going to draw it too accurately because we're not seeing that side of the hand, but just sketching that in is going to help me to interpret a little bit better what's going on. We've also got the ulnar and the radial bone, which leads into the arms. And again, if we have a look at my other diagrams, I think this is the ulnar, like this small, or is that the radial bone? I can't actually remember now. Like I said, this isn't really a tutorial, so don't be... You can watch what I do if you want to figure it out with me, but don't bloody take any of the names that I'm... Because I can't even remember which part's which now. I used to know this stuff, like, really in depth, and I've forgotten it all, which is why I don't bother, you know, obsessing over anatomy that much. I think that's the ulnar. But anyway, this bone, the smaller side, is on the pinky side, as you can see. And the pinky is over here. So that's that little bone is going in there. So what I might do, I might just very quickly just sketch some circles, all right? That way I can just very quickly imagine the three-dimensionality of that, so to speak. And then I can sort of start sketching in those planes in a little more accurate detail. And there is like a bit of a curvature with these forms. But yeah, the planes that I'm drawing right now, they are just they're just my interpretation of the forms. I'm not suggesting this is what the actual planes of the bones are. And that's what I've kind of learned studying from various artists like Bames, Proko, some of the Russian academics. You know, it was very interesting to see how different artists actually conceptualize the forms in different ways. And that's kind of a revelation. Because, you know, when I was younger and I started learning anatomy for the first time, I was very obsessed with trying to draw everything correctly. Like, drawing everything as it should be drawn. And the truth is that bones, while they are made of a very hard surface, they're still very abstract forms, and the shapes of them are going to still vary to a degree between human beings. I think the skull is a very good example of that. Like, there was a few anatomical diagrams of like different types of skull shapes where the forehead protrudes a little bit more. Maybe the back of the head is sometimes flatter than other people's. You know, it's very interesting when you start to understand how even bones have very irregular shapes, and they tend to have a bit of a variety. So when you're drawing the planes, you want to kind of get the basic structure correct, but at the same time, you don't have to bog yourself down too much with the technicalities, I guess. You can kind of make it up as you need to. Just so long as you're always keeping that perspective in mind, I think. I think that's probably the important part. I'm just going to do some hatching strokes there. So I'm just going to like leave a bit of a gap between the joint. So the arm bones, and this is like the carpus, like the wrist, basically. I'm going to leave like a bit of a gap between the two, as you can see that I've done in my other drawings. And that just kind of shows off the structure a little bit more. I think it also just helps to clarify the perspective a little bit more too, which is why I'm doing that. If you're struggling drawing bones, what you can do is, I got some sketches. Ah, here we go. I would honestly just go to that Proko video on hands. He's got a whole playlist of them. And you can see how he draws the hand bones kind of like this. They're very mechanical looking. And that's the thing. They don't really look like real bones, but it does show the mechanics of those bones and how they move and like what the joints are. And I think that's why his videos are very valuable for that. And you should probably practice that first. And then once you get good at that, start having a look at some Russian academic drawings. You can see I've kind of sketched from a few of them here. And then you can kind of just sketch the basic shapes of the bones, kind of using this as your template. I think that would be the best way to study that. But, you know, Proko's method for drawing the hand bones is, I think, a really great way to learn. And then once you've got that down pat, just start studying from the Russian academic. Like, you know, just look at like I would literally just Google that, like Russian academic hand drawing or something like that, and see what you find. You want to be looking from students of the St. Petersburg Academy, okay? None of that bark plate nonsense. You know, we're trying to get good at drawing from imagination, so that's why we're doing it this way. We don't want to be copying. We want to be, we want to be learning. We want to be understanding the structure of things. And that's the thing, you know, you might say, well, you know, you're copying this, and it's like, well, I mean, I'm using the pose, but the bones, I'm kind of just drawing based on what I know of the structure. So I'm not really copying it. I'm kind of just adding an extra layer of detail to it. And I think that's a great way to study this, actually. If you're going to learn how to draw the bones of the hand, I would just get like a very basic reference, or you could use a photo of a real hand. You could even just draw your own hand, right? But, you know, get good at drawing the bones and then see if you can draw them just by using your own hand or using like a basic sketch. That's how I'm learning right now, because I think doing that just makes me a better artist, because it's forcing me to actually think. It's forcing me how to think about how to draw the structure. It's forcing me to think about the perspective and how to make it three-dimensional. Whereas, again, when I first... Oh, by the way, so I'm just going to use circles to draw these joints and the knuckles. What was I saying? Oh, yeah. So when I first was drawing hands, I was just copying from photos, and I was drawing my own hand a lot. And I would try drawing my own hand from life. And I just kind of found that that wasn't really helping me get better at drawing hands from imagination, because I wasn't drawing like this. I wasn't drawing structurally. I was always just kind of doing, I guess, the bark plate method, where you start with the silhouette, then you copy the shadow shapes. And I think that's exactly the step that the bark plates get wrong. They want you to draw the shadow shapes and like the silhouette of the shadow shapes and then just fill it in. And yes, that does produce a nice realistic image, but that doesn't teach you how to draw from your head. Because in order to draw those shadow shapes, you have to learn the planes. And the bark plates, I noticed, weren't really teaching that part. Like, they were very simplistic diagrams, and they didn't really teach you much of like the planes of the human figure. So I think eventually what I did was, when I wanted to start getting good at drawing characters, I kind of looked towards Gottfried Bametz, who was like a German artist in the 20th century. He's got a lot of books on human anatomy, very famous art instructor, so you've probably heard of him at some point. And I loved his diagrams because, you know, they were still very sketchy, and they weren't like rendered to like a photorealistic finish, but that was precisely what helped me, because I could see the line work and I could see the construction. And I'm just kind of drawing, like, I'm just kind of looking at how that, you can see the tip of that pinky finger in there, so I'm just going to just sketch that in briefly. So there's a knuckle there. Knuckle there. I'm just using just basic circles for the knuckles. That's just kind of what helps me. What was I saying? Yeah, like Gottfried Bametz's sketches really helped me because I could actually see the forms. And then I was like, man, that's how I want to learn anatomy, you know? Like I don't want these photorealistic drawings of anatomy because that's not really helping me. Like it looks great, but that's not helping me understand the forms. Like I need to see the structure, I need to see the planes, I need to see the construction lines. And that's why most of what I've learned from drawing figures and what helps me to draw, you know, heads from imagination and figures from imagination, I've actually learned from drawings from other artists. I didn't actually learn it from photographs. So that's kind of my secret little recipe. So maybe you want to do the same thing. And I think it makes sense to learn like that because that's what the old masters did. You know, they didn't have cameras centuries ago. So if they wanted to learn to draw something, they had to learn it from other artists. And I think when you learn from the drawings of other artists, sorry, I'm just concentrating right now. Goddamn, hands are hard. When you learn from other artists, like you're not just copying the drawing, you're actually seeing the steps that they took to get there. It's like a recipe. You're actually seeing like how they thought about the forms and what kind of decisions they made to get there, what sort of lines they would draw. So, you know, when you're studying from the drawings of the old masters or the academics, you want to actually really be studying the construction lines, okay? So any drawing that's like been rendered to a near photorealistic finish, it's very beautiful. And I think you can learn a lot from rendering from those, absolutely. But I don't think you learn much in terms of structure. I think if you're going to learn the planes of a form, then you really want like these more constructive sketches, and you want to see the construction lines because they're actually going to tell you exactly what steps were taken to get to that point. So that's just, again, this is all just my opinion. Like you can take it with a grain of salt. I don't mind. I think all artists kind of learn in their own way eventually anyway. But yeah, I just find that's kind of what helped me. Studying the sketches and the unfinished drawings. And that's why I love Bamez, because like you can just see everything. He draws like these X-ray views of hands and bones and skulls and everything, and it's like the form is just so clear to me after that. And so, you know, the reason I'm telling you this is because, you know, if you're studying from photographs, then maybe you should try changing your strategy and look at the sketches instead, because I think they just tell you so much more. So what I'm doing right now, I'm kind of drawing these cross sections of the knuckles, if you're wondering what that was. So I drew like these balls, which are just vague indications of the muscles. The knuckles, sorry, knuckles. We're not drawing muscles today. And then I'm drawing the cross sections of them, which is going to help me to draw the perspective. Because I can see, you know, this side of the knuckle is facing away from me, and then as the finger turns, as the perspective turns, this side, like I'm seeing less of this side of this knuckle, which is kind of giving it that three-dimensional effect. So what I like to do at this point is I like to just kind of draw the center profile of the figures. So we're going to be seeing less of this side of the finger. Oh, actually, you know what? Before I do that stage, I should actually draw the silhouettes of the bones now. Very easy to do. All I do is I just draw this concaved line between the joints. That's what I do. I was meant to draw that bit first, so sorry, I'm skipping steps. It's very important to have a method when you're drawing constructively and not to skip steps. Although you can skip steps if you're a bit more experienced. But like I said, drawing the hand bones in this way still quite new to me. So I'm not gonna rock the boat. I'm just going to follow the process, and it'll take me however long it takes me. I don't care. I'm not interested in being the fastest sketcher today. I am only interested in learning. That's the agenda for today. Okay. And then, of course, the metacarpals do the same thing. You can see I've drawn that same concave form for the metacarpals, although they'd be a little bit thicker, I'd imagine. Maybe a slight gap between, maybe these are like overlapping forms here. And when I'm drawing these, I have to also keep in mind that it's going to be wider towards the knuckle side, and then it's going to start getting skinnier towards the fingertip. At the same time, you also have to take the perspective into account. So that can also complicate things. So, you know, it's very easy to sort of bog yourself down with technicalities and things like perspective and form and 3D and blah, blah, blah. My advice, this is what I do now. Sketch it in now and fix it later. That's my method now. But, you know, when I'm sketching things, you know, I'm always aware that I'm only searching for things in this stage, so it's not final. Everything is subject to change. That's why I keep my lines very light to begin with. If my drawing gets too dark, then I can just take my eraser, just gently roll over it. Not too much. That just cleans the drawing up a little more. But yeah, these really dark spots where I've probably gone a bit too dark, I'll just clean that up. Clean the drawing up a little. And now I can continue. Right, now I'm going to have a look for that profile line of each finger. Now that I've got the silhouette, got a little bit more of information. So when I draw the joints of the fingers, I put like this little V shape in between the joints. So you can have a look at this diagram. That's kind of what that is, where the joint of each bone is. And I do that for everything. I do that for the metacarpals, do that for the phalanges. I do it for absolutely everything. It's a bit small on this drawing, so I don't know if you're really seeing much of it, but that's what I do. And then I just kind of sketch the profile line. We might be able to see it a little bit better on this side. So I just got to kind of sketch where I'm just going to estimate the center of that finger. Okay, so now I've got a bit of a better idea of what's going on. So there's the joint there. Kind of falls down, slopes down the finger. There's this joint here. Slides down the metacarpal, and then it sort of curls back up. So there's like this curvature on the fingers. And then this is kind of where the knuckle begins to turn away from us, so we're not seeing that next phalange. But I will probably put the joint right here. That just gives it a more three-dimensional effect. See how I'm just sketching in that profile line, and I've done that for every single drawing, and this really helps me. But you know what, once I've figured out my method, hopefully I can give you guys a bit more of a better tutorial on this. But right now I'm still actually learning myself, so I'm not gonna, I don't want to present this as a tutorial as such, even though you could definitely learn from it. Like I said, this drawing might turn out to be completely disastrous, and I don't want to be responsible for giving you bad information. So this is just me playing around. Right. And then okay. Yep. That's going to curl around there. Looks like there's like another joint somewhere there, but it's facing away from us maybe. Now I do need to draw that thumb in, because in the sketch you can see there's a bit of a thumb poking out. So I should probably sketch the silhouette of that. I'll just leave it like that for now. We can come back to that later. Right. So that's what we've got. I might just edit some of these lines. Okay. Now I can start sketching in that sort of three-dimensionality of each joint with hopefully a little bit more precision. And I can start refining the silhouettes of these bone shapes. I'm gonna get that pencil out of the way. That just keeps getting in my way. And I'm not looking at any pictures of bones right now, I guess except for the things that are in front of me, I suppose. So I suppose that's technically a reference, but I'm not looking at any photographs. I'm just kind of sketching in my interpretation of the structure. And I'm always thinking about that 3D form. That is definitely something that I'm doing. And that's why I'm not interested in copying from photos. I'm not interested in copying the anatomy. I'm actually more interested in drawing it in a structural way. And even though I've not finished drawing that index finger, I'm actually going to jump to the next finger and start drawing this side. It's always a good idea to it's always a good idea to sort of jump around a lot and not get tunnel visioned. I always say that. And I say that because it's true. And I think pretty much every art teacher is going to tell you the same thing, because it's truth. You know, you do not want to get tunnel visioned into a specific place. You've always got to kind of look at your drawing from a distance and assess it that way. And when I was a hyperrealist, when I was drawing like hyperrealism, I would always get tunnel visioned. I would kind of, you know, render this corner of the drawing here, and then the next square, and then the next bit, and the next bit, and then down here. And, you know, whereas academic drawing teaches you to draw everything as a whole and render everything as a whole. And the reason for that is because A, the drawing is going to turn out better because you can see how your tones are developing in one go. And B, you can actually leave the drawing at any stage. If you render everything as you go, you could leave the drawing basically half finished and it's still going to look good. You don't have to finish the drawing, so to speak. So I'm kind of thinking about those overlapping forms right now. Thinking about how I can make some of these forms look a little more 3D. Just drawing those planes, but again, my own interpretation of those planes. And it's funny how much you can describe with just a little bit of line work, just a few carefully placed lines. I've almost finished the line work for this drawing, I think, so it's not going to take me all day to draw this, which is good. And yeah, I'm always thinking about the perspective of these things and where those lines are likely to overlap. But yeah, I absolutely love academic drawing. I just love drawing like this. I love thinking like this. Just the ability to think on a more three-dimensional level is just really important to me as an artist. This is kind of where it gets a little tricky. There's a bit of foreshortening, or I should say there's a lot of foreshortening here. So might be best to keep that area a little bit vague for now until I figure that out later. Kind of looks like that entire area is in shadow anyway though, so I probably don't have to think too hard. I can just, if there's anything I can't draw, I can just render over it with a bit of shadow. I can just sort of cheat that way. Not everything has to be explicitly stated in a drawing. In fact, ambiguity is a good thing. This fingertip at the index finger, that's going to be a bit of a pain in the ass to draw. We're not really seeing much of it, so just sketch a little bit of a silhouette there, I think. Tip of the thumb. It's got like this sort of hook form. And then, again, it's kind of tucked behind the hand, so we're not really seeing much of that. So I don't have to go too overboard on that, I don't think. Maybe I can draw the next phalange of the thumb, just sort of hiding behind this part of the hand there. Just let it fade out a little bit, maybe. Let that become part of the atmosphere. Like I said, like this is more of a slightly more of a detailed study, but we don't want to also go overboard on things. Like, not everything has to be explicitly stated. To be honest with you, I should really be focusing on controlling my line weights a little more. It's probably something I should keep in mind for the next drawing. Just kind of vary the line weight a little bit. You know, the quickest solution for that is probably just to go over the drawing with an eraser and then just pick out certain lines that I want to define, and then should hopefully clean the drawing up a little bit and just make it more readable. You don't want thick, heavy lines everywhere. But, you know, when you're sort of drawing these things, drawing the planes of these things from your head, you've got to really figure out a lot of it. Alright. So now I've just got to separate the side plane from the top planes of each phalange, which requires even more construction. Can you believe it? I'm just going to draw like a heavy line there just to sort of highlight that part of the silhouette. So my I used to have like I did a bit of online tuition with this instructor who trained at the Moscow Architectural University, and he was a brilliant teacher. I would say he was probably the one of the best instructors I had, and he was very into linear drawing. You know, he would try to describe everything with a line, and he would, you know, vary his line weights accordingly. And he would describe things with a bright line, a heavy line, a thin line, a thick line. He taught me to sort of, you know, use line as a way of revealing the 3D form, which is interesting because I think as artists we're always told that, you know, you need to use tone to draw 3D forms. But he disagreed. He said line, you know, varying the line weights and things like that should be used to describe the 3D nature of things, of what you're drawing. Because if you can describe three-dimensional forms with just a line, that means you actually have a true understanding of that form. It means you've actually determined where that plane is going to be. And it just makes so much sense. So it's like, yeah, from a photorealistic point of view, it's not going to look as realistic because there's lines on the page, and as we know, lines don't exist in real life. But from a structural point of view, and an architectural point of view, it makes sense to describe things with lines. I mean, that's what architects do. You don't do a tonal rendering of a building as such. You know, when you sketch a building, you actually draw the line work, and you're separating the planes with lines. And that's kind of what he was talking about. And it kind of makes sense in that way. If you're going to learn how to draw in the 3D, should probably get good at linear drawing. So I'm gonna just brighten it up again, clean it up. That's the thing with these constructive drawings, they do get quite messy. And then just with a heavier line, I'm just going to kind of determine those overlapping forms. I'm just going to kind of pick parts of the silhouette out. Obviously, I'm not going to draw everything. But I am just kind of going to go over my work and just kind of go over some of those plane changes a little bit. Just going to sort of darken the areas that I believe will be in shadow. Okay, so it's, you know, not necessarily to say that it's true to life, but, you know, in the context of what we've got on the drawing, I am going to pick out certain things and areas that I believe would likely be in shadow and separate them from the light shapes. But I'm just trying to be careful not to go too heavy with this, because it can actually complicate the drawing a little bit. I remember reading a quote. Can't actually remember who said it, but apparently there was an artist that said, you know, you can tell the quality of an artist by the way they draw hands. And I actually cannot remember for the life of me who said that. But that quote kind of is what inspired me to start studying hands again today, because I was like, oh man, yeah, I got to get good at that. So while I'm doing this, I'm trying to think about where the light source is coming from. So I'm trying to darken the lines that I, again, are thinking might be in shadow. But again, I don't want to think too hard about it. It's a very organic form, and to be honest, it doesn't really matter how technical I try to be with this. It's kind of going to be wrong anyway, in a sense, because you know it's such a difficult form that you can't possibly predict where every single shadow is going to be. But I do think we can make an effort or attempt to design the shadows in a sense. Right, well, I'm going to start rendering. So I'm just going to start hatching in those shadow shapes. I think I'll start by doing that. If there's anything I'm kind of unsure about, then I can just sort of let it fade out with the hatching strokes. Like I said, like not everything in the drawing has to be defined. And it's good to leave a bit of ambiguity in the drawing as well. Now the reason I've decided to study hand bones is because your hand is basically mostly bone. Like you can see the metacarpals here, you can see the knuckles, the phalanges. It's just a lot of bone covered in skin, essentially. most of the muscles and like the surface stuff is probably on the palm side of the hand. This is where the bones are a bit less visible. But on the back of the hand, they're very visible. You know, you can see those metacarpals and things like that. So this is kind of what I wanted to get good at drawing hands a little better, so I could draw them a bit more structurally. All right. Let's jump in. Let's jump back into it. Right. So I had to take a call very quickly, so I had to interrupt that little drawing session. So I think I was up to the rendering part. Just going to throw in some very light halftones on the phalanges just to kind of just get a bit more of that three-dimensionality going. Not bad for the first drawing of the day, I think. It's doing okay. And sometimes when you're rendering a lot of the halftones in these forms, I don't think you have to draw every single plane with a line. Like, you can just sort of tone it in once you've got your general forms established. I think you can kind of just predict a little more easily where those halftones and those shadows are going to land. But, you know, I think it does start with a very strong linear drawing. I do think you have to have a good, strong basis first. I think it makes the rendering process also go a little bit faster when you've already kind of got it mapped out. That's kind of what line work is in a drawing. It's a map. And it's a map that you use... Sorry, somebody keeps texting me. Who's that? Get back to that later. Yeah, it's a map that you use to kind of just plan everything, you know? Composition, perspective, light, shadow. Line work is so important. And yes, you know, I do like tonal drawing as well. I do a lot of tonal drawing for when I'm sketching like some of these faces here. I actually used tonal drawing to draw this guy's face, which, you know, there he is on the camera there. I just started mapping the tones. I didn't really go too heavy on the line work. Because with tonal drawing, as long as you're good at it and you have a good understanding of the planes of what you're drawing, it just gets the idea on paper a lot quicker, and it's quicker to develop it. However, your ability to draw tonally, I think, really does rely on your ability to draw linearly. Because again, it's the linear drawing that informs you of the structure of these things. It's what teaches you how to draw in perspective properly. Tonal drawing is a great technique, and I do use it. I do like it. But it won't really teach you the technicalities of things, if that makes sense. Like, it just doesn't... I'm really having a hard time explaining it. Tonal drawing is just something you use when you want a quick impression of something, okay? I don't think it should be something that you use for studies like this. I think you always want to be drawing linearly. I'm just kind of switching between pencils right now. So if you're wondering, I don't really think it matters too much, but I'm using a 6B and a 2H. And the 2H, you can go over the 6B pencil with a 2H pencil to really deepen the tones, like cast shadows, things like that. Anything that's going to have like a really dark tone can go over a soft pencil with a hard pencil. But, you know, I don't think it matters too much. I think you could use a 4B and an HB pencil, for example, you know? So, you know, it's funny how a lot of students always ask, you know, what are the best pencils to use for a drawing? It's like, they're all good. They're all pencils, you know? It's not the pencil that's the problem. I'm not being mean when I say this, but, you know, it's not the pencil that's the problem. It's you, all right? And again, I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean you should get good at drawing with any kind of pencil and any material too. You know, like I'm actually not very good at charcoal drawing. It's very messy. It's not my preferred medium. But that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with the medium. It's me as an artist. Like, I'm not good at charcoal drawing. And I'm quite happy to admit that. I don't pretend to be good at charcoal drawing. That's why I don't do charcoal demos. I would like to get good at it. So I should probably try and find some time to put aside and get good at charcoal. But yeah, you know, it's not a problem with the medium. It's just a problem with me. Like, I just haven't practiced enough. So, you know, if you're one of those people who are always asking, like, you know, what kind of pencil do you use or what pen do you use? It's honestly, that's really not the issue. The issue is that, you know, from a drawing perspective, the issue is usually the case that you're just not practicing perspective enough. You're not drawing three-dimensionally or whatever. Rarely ever is it the material that's the problem. So, but that being said, you know, it's still good to know, I guess, what materials I am using, how I use it. So I guess, you know, I can kind of understand that too. But I actually remember, I can't, oh man, I read, like, again, maybe I read it on social media or something, I can't remember, but there was this, it was the funniest comment, but it was such a good comment. I think it was like on a post or something, but basically this guy said, you know, if you gave Michelangelo a bit of toilet paper and a crayon, he would still be able to draw a masterpiece on it. And I absolutely love that. Because I think it's kind of true, you know? The material is not going to prevent the artist from making a good picture, even if it's on a scrap of toilet paper. I mean, toilet paper is not the most ideal medium, so, you know, I'm not saying do that, but, you know, I really like that quote, because it's like, you're only limited by your own understanding of things. It's not so much the tool that you're using a lot of the time. So at this point of the drawing, it's really, I think this is just a bit of back and forth. I probably should have planned those plane changes a little bit better. And then maybe I would have got the drawing done by now. But, because, you know, rendering, you don't actually have to spend that long on rendering, truth be told. Just a few carefully placed hatching strokes and you've got a good image. But as you can see, I'm just kind of going back into everything, and it's probably because I just didn't spend enough time thinking about what I was doing. But that's okay. Like I said, this is the first drawing of today, and I'm going to do quite a few more today because I got some time. So I'll just make sure the next drawing I'll do a better job. But, you know, another reason, and I've said this before in a previous video, but another reason I'm kind of taking a long time sketching this is it's kind of because I'm enjoying it. Like, I used to hate drawing the bones of the hands. I really did. I don't know. Because I wasn't very good at it. But now that I'm kind of, well, I feel like I'm sort of improving. I feel like I'm actually enjoying it a bit more now. But this drawing, I think, is reaching its conclusion. I don't want to try and go overboard on the rendering. I just wanted to get just an impression, really, of the structure that I'm drawing, and I think I've got it. So should probably wrap this up soon. Hopefully the next drawing will go a little bit quicker. But yeah, I'm actually kind of struggling to think today. I did not sleep well. You know what I'm realizing is that your ability to draw really does rely on how well you sleep. Because, you know, drawing like this, as I've said before, it's a thinking man's game. And you can't think very well when you've not had a good night's sleep, so I'll make sure tonight I'll sleep a bit better, hopefully. Yeah, I think it's probably time to call it. Can't help it though. Just keeps scratching away. Just going to sort of darken the tip of the thumb here. And then you can kind of see how light the silhouette is there. Which means I should probably darken this bit in here. So now I'm just trying to just quickly kind of just get a bit more atmosphere in the drawing. Again, I feel like sometimes I go a bit overboard in this stage, but I just want the highlights of those phalanges to just really just glow a little bit more. So I'm just trying to organize my tones a little bit. Trying to lose some of that detail as well, because I felt like you could see every part of the silhouette, and I'm trying to kind of fade some of those tones into the background and just kind of suggest a lot of these shapes instead. Well, I think that's it today, guys. So that's it. Just taking this reference here and trying to draw an interpretation of the bones of the hand here. It's alright. I like it. I still like this one more, and this one here. Probably should have made the drawing a little bit bigger so I could have captured more of that detail. But these are only meant to be small thumbnail sketches, so you know, if you're practicing, you don't want to draw too big because it's going to take longer and it could result in a lot of wasted time. So I like to always just kind of keep my sketches on a smaller scale. I just find that that helps me a little bit more. But you know, not a bad attempt. I'm quite happy with it. I would like to hopefully improve on the next attempt. But like I said, I'm still learning the bones of the hand. I'm still trying to get better at toning them and making them look a bit more convincing and just playing around with them, really. Like, I'm not trying to Again, photorealism is not what I want. I just want something that looks structured. But yeah, I wouldn't mind going back into... Wouldn't mind actually just trying that same pose again, but just make it a bit bigger. So maybe that's something I could think about doing. But anyway, there we go. Draw with me. Bones of the hand. Probably should have done a few warm-ups to speed things up, but I just couldn't resist. I just wanted to dive straight in and draw this. So anyway, maybe next time I record, I'll try and do a few more warm-ups instead. I think I always say that every episode, and then I just never do it. But anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I will be back soon with another video. So stay tuned.